Hello, everyone. Welcome to our workshop, The Unorganized Brain, helping parents understand their ADHD child's frustrations. Hi, I'm George Hirsch, and I want to go over a few things to how to increase your viewing experience, turn off everything that is operating in the background, including your email, Skype, iTunes, or any other program that's you have running. It'll really slow down you receiving everything here. So silence your phone, close your door, give yourself this time to discover these new strategies. I'm on here. I'll probably leave this on for a few minutes just so you know I'm here and who I am. And just wanted to kind of touch base and give you the background on it. And then so understanding, your child's frustrations, the unorganized brain, the three factors affecting your ADHD child's success. Two you can control, but one you can't. The other thing we're going to be talking about is a closer look at your child's unconscious mind and those 10 processes that are working in there. And I'll just flip this off. And three, knowing your child's baseline, the changing those old habits and how you can get them to change the new habits. So you're in the right place, parents, if you're trying to understand your child's lack of focus, impulse control, behavior, taking responsibility, and really about any other ADHD symptom. You see your child going into overwhelm daily or weekly, so they're having either a breakdown or tantrums, or you're seeing them just really shut down and getting into overwhelm. You're a parent frustrated with the education system. I know there's a lot of great teachers out there. When I refer to the education system, I think you've got this complex, old system that's been around for a lot of years that pretty much handcuffs a lot of really great teachers that are trying their best and they're frustrated with the education system itself. And then you may be a parent that's frustrated with your teacher that you have. You may have a teacher that's not living up to what you want, your expectations, or there's many reasons that can be going on with the education system, and we want to talk about that. You feel like there's so much more potential in your child's academically, socially, or athletically. Our programs deal with all that, and this workshop we'll touch base and kind of go over some of those things that can really improve that performance. You've noticed your child's self-esteem slipping down over the last couple years. So, it could have happened in the last 6 months, but you're really noticing that self-esteem dropping. Your child's not lazy, stupid, or crazy. You hear a lot of things that your child's just lazy, or maybe your spouse just thinks they're lazy and they're not trying hard enough, and they're probably working harder than you can ever believe to keep up with school. So I know you'll get a lot out of today's workshop, so please stay tuned to the end. I'd like to bribe you and keep you around. So I'll be giving you a special offer to help your child, plus a couple of special bonus gifts that you'll get. So please stick around to the end. We put a lot of work on this workshop, and we really like you to, stick around. Hopefully, find it all interesting. But I understand time is precious for everyone, so I'll try to keep it as short and brief. But it'll be roughly about an hour, maybe a little over. We may run over. I'm trying to get this down as quickly as I can, so and cover as much as I can. So I'd like you to know a little bit about me. I lived my life, struggling and being frustrated for over 30 years. So, I was not a good student, and education system was not really designed for me very well. And I've learned a lot, especially after I turned 30 and kind of went on a self-improvement kick and spent the last 27 years of my life really digging in deep and trying to understand what makes people tick, what makes myself tick, and how you can effectively change those issues that you have that are holding you back and that you want to perform at higher levels. So my thoughts and prayers are with you and your family as we go on this journey and together. And you know, I know it can be frustrating. I've been where you are. I've been frustrated by many different systems and things out there. So ADHD Managed, our mission is to improve individuals' performance so that they can lead a happier, healthier, and more productive life. And we do that through teaching parents how to work one-on-one with their child using our tools and strategies to overcome ADHD symptoms and many other learning issues, you know, the coexisting conditions that tie to ADHD, whether it's dyslexia, you know, OCD, ODD, even autism. Our program works for any of those things, but we'll delve into that later. But we got to get kind of educate you a little bit before we get into other things. We won't really be talking about our program much in this workshop. It'll really be primarily about the cause of the issue. So bear with me here. So a little bit more about myself. I'm again George Hirsch, co-founder of ADHD Managed, along with my son Mark. Yeah, I've been born and raised in Topeka, Kansas. I live in Overland Park, Kansas now. I've been in Kansas City for the last 7 years in the Kansas City area. Have 3 grown children, Jessica, Jamie, and Mark, and 4 grandchildren, Zachary, Clara, and Brody, and Quinn. And I've been a successful businessman, entrepreneur, mentor, leadership expert for, you know, a large chunk of my life, but especially the last 27 years as a business owner and leadership trainer, expert in developing personnel, managed and ran many successful companies. So of my own, and been in partners with other people, but I have helped myself and countless parents overcome their ADHD child symptoms. So I've helped myself and I've helped others do it. So let's jump into the whole thing, and I'm not gonna have a whole big dog and pony show on this. It's gonna be pretty much laying everything out for you, and hopefully you can pick everything up. So 3 factors affecting your ADHD child success: really diet, environment, and genetics. You may think, oh, no kidding, but these are primarily what people break things down into. You know, a lot of programs are going to tell you got to have them on a strict diet. You definitely want to control their environment, and of course, genetics is something that really can't control. They're born. The genetics code is there, but things that you can control is diet. You know, you definitely can control what your child eats. Their sugars, their caffeine, carbohydrates, proteins, and other stimulants like medications and just anything that's going to stimulate that brain. So I'm going to go really quickly on this because I think most parents understand that you should have a healthy, balanced diet, but active kids are very hard sometimes to keep in a restricted diet, whether it's restricted from carbohydrates or restricted from caffeine or sugar. Obviously, stimulant meds are just a larger form of caffeine in essence. I mean, that's what caffeine's a stimulant. And whether you're using Adderall, Ritalin, Vyvanse, those kind of medications are going to stimulate the brain in some way. And not going to knock them, and that's one choice a lot of parents make. And we seem to have a lot of success getting kids off their medications and being able to be more natural. So controlling their environment is really as critical as anything too. It's that, because I'm going to start actually at the bottom, deal with stress in school, stress at home. You know, those things are really they're working on the brain. I mean, they really are affecting how the brain operates. And when you have a child that's struggling at school or struggling at home, you really got to look at the stress that's in their life. And you know, that child's reaching out, communicating somehow. You may not be reading it, but they're reaching out and they're frustrated. They're struggling. You have to think of something outside of what the norm is. That's the biggest problem most people think of, is that when you look at diet and environment, in what you can control, you control their environment. Almost everybody, almost every professional out there is going to give you a set of guidelines that are almost identical to what they would give to any other parent to do for a healthy child. And unfortunately, it's like I hear it all the time with parents that sit there and go, no blanking shit. I've tried that. It doesn't work with my child. And that's what's, to me, is mind-boggling, that people and professionals alike sit back and go, oh, make a list, do this, do this, do this. You have to do something different. The school system is going to have to do something different. At home, you're going to have to do something different to deal with a child that's wired differently and has a different brain. And you can't expect them to be like, I want to say, I hate to say normal person, but all this generation of stress and all these things are happening because you think you're going to be able to put them into the same box that everybody else is. And it's crazy. It's ludicrous to think you can do that over and over again and force them into that. And, you know, back to diet, medication is one way to do that, is to stimulate the brain. It's really numbing the brain. It is anything, numbing the senses, and they're able to function, slowing the brain down. It's not natural, though. It's not their natural self. It can help them perform like other people want them to perform, but it's not their natural way of performing. So genetics, it's, you know, like I say, it's too late. The odds of becoming a human being is 1 in 400 trillion. And so, you know, you and your spouse formed a child, and the genetics, the odds are that if they have ADHD symptoms, then one of the parents are going to have the same symptoms. I think there's just more and more research you're going to find that the genes of ADHD are passed down from one parent to the other, and so it's in your family somewhere, and I think they'll eventually trace it back to, you know, the hunter of the tribe or something that eludes people that they're more kinesthetic learners, and that they're just not a visual or auditory learner. But you have the parents, grandparents, family members, and then the traits associated with that. And those behaviors, you know, ADHD is a neurobehavioral developmental disorder. It is a neurobehavioral developmental disorder. So it is a something that is a behavioral issue. So all three of these affect your child's performance. So when I tell you that the brain controls everything, there's no real surprise. Unconsciously controlling all your mental, emotional, physical activities of your body, that's what your brain is doing. And so the unorganized brain is going to create thoughts and actions daily that don't line up with the rest of society. And so you're going to be different than the rest of the norm of society. And most people want to fit into the norm, and it's a little different when you're not fitting into the norm. But your brain is there to keep each individual alive and to survive. And you have this fight or flight, you know, saying that everybody likes to use, that when you get down into your reptilian brain, that it's fight or flight, but it's also freeze. And so you got to realize there's, you know, fight or flight or freeze. And when they're freezing, you know, the brain is shutting down and really turning off. And same thing when the flight, if you want to say that, but a lot of times flight gets down to they froze, and then they're shutting down and they're running because the fear is so great. But you know, you have the same thing with somebody uh, fights, they're locked into the same situation, and they've got what I call radar lock on, and the tensions just build, and people, drive each other crazy because the fight of arguments just keep going and going and going. And so, but their brain has really shut down and locked into just the argument, and has limited itself for any new ideas. And so the mental stress that's happening all the time, it's really learning to know where your weaknesses are and building that strength, having a parent that can help with their child understand they've got to build that mental strength, because it's much easier for a parent to go out and show them how to build their body strength, right? You can gauge that, hey, I can lift or run or do these actions a lot easier with your body than you can to understand that mentally you've got to build that strength with that child, or an adult needs that mental strength so that they can be a productive human being in society. They've got to be able to build that mental strength. And it's one of those things you really can't tell until there's so much pressure on an individual. So taking care of business, I'm going that your conscious brain is your operating system, what you're consciously aware of in your brain, and then your unconscious mind, the real main operating system that's doing 90% of the work, is underneath it all. And it's like your conscious brain is doing a couple thousand thoughts a second, and your unconscious mind is doing 50 million thoughts per second. And they're measuring all these things as we speak. It seems like there's just more and more data about the brain and how it's operating and the connections. It's very fascinating. So on number 2, we're going to take a closer look at your child's unconscious mind and these 10 processes that you can improve for performance. So they're focus, cross pattern, motor match, mental picture, tracking, figureground, directional discrimination, position in space, size, and shape. There's 10 of them there. So I hope these all make sense to you, and I hope that you're getting this, and I hope that you'll find these next 10 things. I'll try to go through them as quickly as possible, but focus is always what I start with. And every time I do a presentation, I ask people all the time, how did you learn to focus? Did you take a class on focusing? How did you learn? And most people, it's stress. It's some parent or some coach telling them to focus harder. And, that's an abstract meaning on what you're trying to do. But when you think about, it's a learned trait, it's easy for a lot of people, yet if someone's eyes and mind cannot focus long enough on the relevant pieces, the brain must guess the information and fill in the blanks. So think about it. If you can't focus your eyes on something long enough, keep them still, then your brain's going to fill in the missing pieces, and you're not gonna. It's going to be guesswork. And a lot of times you can fill in the right stuff, but a lot of times the filling in is the problem. And so companies, if you think about it, companies like Apple, IBM, Microsoft, they're developing things, and Microsoft's developing software, but Apple's developing smartphones and computers, and they're focused on the processing speeds, the storage capacity, and the circuits within the operating system. And that processing speed and storage capacity and circuitry can improve the performance. And we all want to have the fastest processor or the fastest phone. We don't really care about the processor. We just know that the phone operates and can get us whatever we want faster. We're not waiting for it. And so over the last 10, 15 years, as computers have gotten faster processors, it's amazing what's gone on in phones, how much more storage capacity they can have, how much faster that thing can process and retrieve that information. We have to think about it the same way. When you're focusing on something, you're bringing in information, input, you're storing it, and then you want to retrieve it when you need that information. So your mind-body connection, seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, your unconscious mind is processing input from many, many, many resources, and focus starts when this information is brought to your conscious mind or your conscious brain. That's when you start focusing on something, but your body and all the inputs around in your body are sending it all to your brain to process. And so some of the symptoms, again, I'm going to go kind of quickly over these things. Completing tasks, keeping your eyes still, keeping your body still, focusing on one target for a specific length of time. So you could have lack of concentration, lack of comprehension, messy handwriting. So we find that, people, if you watch your child or an individual's eyes, and if they're really moving and darting around, they have no muscle control over their eyes. And that's just a clear sign of, the lack of focus. But a lot of these symptoms are really things that can be corrected easily. And then I would tell you the number one mistake most parents think of is their child has the lack of focus, when it's really something else. We're going to talk about the real problems with ADHD, and it's really not the lack of focus, because I'll just ask you, your child can keep their eyes on a video game. They can probably keep their body still when they're moving their hands, and they can focus on that game for hours and hours. I hear this over and over again, that there are plenty of young boys, at least, and I'm sure there's plenty of girls out there, that their parents believe, or they're on medication, and when they're off their medication, they can play a video game for hours. And there's obviously research on that the game is stimulating the brain, but it's still, if they want to focus on something, this gets back to people get classified as ADHD, but then they also get classified as being able to hyper focus on something. And that's a whole nother issue on another processing issue of why they can't let go of something. And we'll deal with that later on in this discussion. So cross pattern, when doing exercises using our limbs of opposite sides of the body, like running, skipping, marching, we're moving in a cross pattern way. So, your left side of your brain controls right side of your body, and your right side of your brain controls the left side of your body. So opposite sides. And it is so called because these exercises require both sides of the brain to coordinate information with the other side in order to perform the movement. And so between the two hemispheres stands the corpus callosum. And I look at that as like the gate of knowledge and sharing of information. So through those connections, sharing of the information, our brains coordinating these movements are within milliseconds of each other. But if it's like, if you have one side of the brain that is always dominant, it doesn't like to share that information. And so there's a little breakdown of the brain. I'm not going to go through each one of these. You can see them. But I'd like you to point out that the left side of the brain deals with the 2D form of things, and the right side deals with the 3D form of things. And it gets back to imagination versus the analytical side and the 2D form. And so a lot of times on the left side, they'll start talking more and more about 2D or the paper world. The paper world is frustrating to people that have a lack of that left side function in their brain. So here's Ashley, little girl, 12 years old in 7th grade. I just want to point her out because she had a low cross pattern, low motor match. I mean, she's operating at about 13%, very, very low. It's struggling in all her grade activities, reading level low, spelling, math, and auditory discrimination. And excuse me, that jumped ahead of me. Overall, she's just got a really low performance score. We look at this as she's operating at about 15%. Now, very few people operate at 100%, but I do test a number of people that are probably in the 80-85% range. So, you want to be in that 65 to 85% range to really be performing at a higher level. So a few symptoms of cross pattern is coordination and decoding skills, comprehension, remembering concepts from day to day. So the lack of shared information and getting into long-term memory starts affecting your day-to-day remembering of concepts. So number 3, and again, I'm trying to go through these as quickly as possible. Like each one of these we can talk about all day long, but I got to keep going. And so the person's ability, the body and the brain, to respond within a given time frame. So speaking, hearing, moving, seeing, and touching simultaneously. I always kind of say walking, talking, and chewing gum. And that's kind of it. You're able to do a cross pattern with a motor match. It is kind of what I kind of relate it to as much as anything. And so, you know, if a child has choppy reading or isn't very fluid with things and can't coordinate, so a public speaker getting stressed, just like me doing this presentation, you know, I've done it a few times now. I'll keep doing it, hopefully getting better and better at it, and it'll flow better. As every time I do it, it flows better, and that's getting the brain comfortable with speaking out loud. And then if you're trying to read out loud, it's a real sign of a motor match issue, and because the brain just can't coordinate those things. And again, here's a young man. This is what we use. We use these evaluation tally sheets or assessment, if you want to say this is our kind of assessment. And I always look here, you know, the boy's overall score was 66. He's operating at about 44%. His motor match cross pattern, he's operating in about a 20% range. He's got a size issue, but his spelling, he's able to read at his grade level, but he was not able to do spelling at his grade level. So this was holding him down, it was very frustrating for him. And, you know, he was trying to be an athlete, but it was tough. So he was really trying to perform things, and his cross pattern just needed to be strengthened in those areas. But this gave us a good indication of where his strengths are as far as direction, Figureground, and tracking. So he didn't really have these Figureground as ADHD. So his idea was that his parents thought he had ADHD, and he didn't have ADHD at all. But it was really this cross pattern, motor match, and then mental picture. So some symptoms of motor match is matching physical movement with auditory cues, responding on cue within an appropriate time frame. So the lack of fluency in physical and mental activities. So if I was going to have you do the simplest thing with the motor match would be if I want to clap and count at the same time. So instead of going, you know, I want to go 1, you would say that it would go 1 or 1, and so that you're off timing. Your timing is off all the time, and so that motor match is all about that timing. So mental picture, I like Einstein said imagination is everything, and he was right. For me, I'm just going to tell you that for me, the 2D world was much easier to imagine or image in my mind than the 3D world was easier than the 2D world. The 2D world to me is the paper world. It's flat. It's has no texture to it at all, and it's definitely hard to imagine. 3D world, being able to daydream, visualize images is much easier to do that. And it's sometimes very hard for a child to take that 2D form and visualize it. There are people that can image that mental picture form and hold it, and it does play a huge role in the education system. I mean, if you don't think so, it's sort of like what person doesn't see that big picture of being able to see a word, and if they can't visualize that word, if they can't lock it in their visual memory, or a lot of people call this working memory. So you can call it visual or working memory, but it's your long-term memory. And if you have poor visual memory to us, it's maybe necessary to see a word 45 or 50 times. That what frustrates parents is they like, well, we went over the spelling list, 2 or 3 times or 5 times and they had it and then they lost it. And it's like, no, you're going to have to go over that spelling list 50 times on those words to get them to really remember it. And then they're going to have to try to imagine something and, get it to kind of almost in the 3D world. There's some really cool exercises you can do to kind of do this with letters, but so it's just it plays a critical part in your academic learning, and mental pictures just a hands down one of the we see it across the board. Poor spellers have a weak mental picture, visual memory. So here's Lauren, 19-year-old girl in freshman in college, spelling at the 4th grade level, just had a really low mental picture. She's operating at 20%. Prior overall score, she's operating about 50%. She's an athlete. She was an actual basketball player, but she's struggling right here with this mental picture, and it's just holding her down. There's another. She's position in space was low. She had a couple other ones, but as an athlete, she had a great cross pattern motor match, but she just, we had to pinpoint where it was because she was one of these kids, highly, highly intelligent, but boy, it didn't come across that way when she was taking tests. As a matter of fact, she really struggled taking tests. Excuse me. So mental pictures, symptoms of that are going to be, they're going to struggle with spelling, they're going to struggle with reading, and they're going to struggle with comprehension. Their short-term memory is going to be tough, and it's going to take a lot of energy. If they're really tired every day, if they're exhausted when they come home from school, I can tell you that chances are they're memorizing everything, and they're just the brain is it's trying to survive and thrive and conserve energy is what I keep hearing everybody talk about. It's trying to conserve energy, but with a child that's got a issue with their mental picture or visual memory, and they're using their short-term memory, they are memorizing so much stuff. It takes so much energy that they're usually exhausted by the end of the day, and school drains them. That's why they come home, they're exhausted, they won't do anything. They're just fried, and so once you build that up, that ability for them to do other things and be willing to participate in other things just exponentially grows. So 5 is tracking. So I hope you guys are getting this stuff. I hope this all makes sense. I hope you can imagine your child, if they fit into any of these categories. I'm hoping you can get a glimmer of maybe where your child fits in with these things, and that you're kind of learning something new on it. So bear with me. I think it'll all make sense in the end on where we're going with it. But this is just kind of a short workshop that I really thought would be interesting for a lot of parents and different really train of thought. So tracking, you already probably know, but if you give your child too many things to do at once, that it overwhelms them. You may have one of those kids. So if you've ever tried to get them to pick up their room and they can't, it's really their brain getting overwhelmed. They don't know where to start. And so their brain looks for something that's basically more pleasurable. And so they avoid it, and they're going to keep avoiding it because they can't figure out where to start. That's true with homework. They can't figure out where to start. They're lost. And so they need guidance. They need a parent that's willing to guide them. And I watched a thing on Facebook the other day. I'm always into parent groups, and I'm like, these parents, these moms I know they want the best for their kids, but they don't have the skills to understand that they just can't videotape their child and keep telling them to read and repeat and read and repeat and read and repeat. And all they do is get into an argument with a child that is, their brain is pushing back. Their subconscious operating system is going to defend them to a point where they're not tracking the reading. They're not tracking with their eyes. They're struggling with it all. And, they want them to read out loud, and chances are they've got a motor match issue, and they don't like what they sound like, and they're frustrated by it. And yet I've watched some moms just keep repeating, and instead of breaking things down with them, helping them understand what they need to do. And it gets back to that same thing of being a parent that's just like repetition, 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 and that's not always going to work. It's not going to help them really develop that skill. It's just going to aggravate them more and more and more, and that's what happened in the video. And at the end of the day, they're not learning anything because the brain's already shut down. You got to stop, get them reset, and because they've lost track of what they really want to do. And so it has to be a learned skill to be able to read and do it with your eyes, and the chances are their eyes are going all over the page and they can't keep their place and they can't track. So if they don't develop this skill, then their eyes are going to jump around the pages. They're going to see words backwards, and the parent's going to think they're dyslexic, when all it really is they're a content reader. They're reading the content because they don't know a word. Their brain can't figure out a word, so the brain races forward with the eyes and tries to figure out all the other content in the paragraph to figure out what that word is. And when the eyes are tracking back, they see words backwards, and they're showing this is more and more that there's more and more research showing that a content reader will reverse words as much as anybody. So it doesn't mean your child's dyslexic. So just means they got a really fast brain that's moving ahead of it, and they don't have the skills yet to hold their eyes long enough to get all the information to be able to assimilate what that symbols mean. So I was going to talk about one of my students, my first student, Ricky Whitehead, who we kind of have as our poster child of, if Ricky can do it, anybody can do it, because Ricky's processing and was operating at about 9% when he started our program. We've got him up so far to 59%. But Ricky was a 29-year-old young man who lived at home with his parents, pretty much was frustrated with his life, and worked as a bag boy at a grocery store, and pretty much didn't like what he was doing. And sorry, I don't know why that jumps. But he was a friend of mine's son, and I started working with him, and we worked with a lot of things to get him to be able to do things and build his cross pattern motor match. Physical things were tough for Ricky. Ricky had a real disconnect with physical things and mental things. But we brought everything up, and it just goes to show you that an individual with very, very low performing processing speeds can upgrade that operating system, that computer system. And this is in 2018 in the spring, and in the fall of 17, Ricky actually got his learner's permit and started driving. And I don't think he's driving completely by himself, but I think he drives every day with his dad, and we think he'll eventually be able to drive a car. And so his dad never thought he'd ever be able to drive a car, and it was a huge step for him to become independent and be able to keep getting educated. We're actually having to kind of go back and teach him more. Reading has gotten up. Spelling and math, obviously, are the core things that he didn't get when he was in school, and so they're actually having to be taught to him again. But we're working on that with Ricky, and he's just a blessing to have worked with, and have really enjoyed the Whitehead family. They're just great people, and we've had a lot of fun doing this. It's been frustrating. It's a lot of work, but Ricky's one that we've got a lot of hours in, and he's not a normal student for us, but he just goes to show you that if you put time and energy into it, anybody can learn. So tracking, you're going to have problems with instructions, so following directions, and the mind-body connection with eye movement and coordination. And then looking at ideas and concepts. So following along with an individual, seeing those instructions, how they fall together. That can mean, do you realize, in my life, I'm going to do this, 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 and this, seeing those bigger picture things, and tracking and following what other people expect out of you. So a lot of times tracking what the teacher's saying, tracking what the parent's saying, they're not following along. If their tracking is low, they're not following you. You think they're following you, but they're not following you. They have no idea what the next step and the next step and the next step is. You see it, but they don't. So they're lost, and you don't take the time. I'm not picking on parents, but most parents don't take the time to fully appreciate that they have to explain that to them. They just think, well, you should know this. Remember, you're an educated adult and they're a child, and you're trying to mentor them. So this whole premise of they should know, I think, is the biggest issue with society. Whatever age they are, if they're 7, 8, 9, 10, they're age appropriate. Realize that. If they're 3, 2, whatever, it's age appropriate. There's age appropriate things for every child. Now, your child may be more advanced in some and lack in others. That's the issue that we're dealing with. It's all about connections in the brain and processing. So Figureground is probably hands down the number one thing that affects kids, and it's probably 90% of ADHD symptoms. So your brain must automatically, or you could say your subconscious mind must rapidly sort the relevant information from the insignificant stuff. So what's relevant, what's insignificant, what's the magnitude of each one of those? So if the sorting of this information does not occur properly, the brain is bombarded with an overabundance of stimuli, and the person tends to respond inappropriately or may respond with inappropriate behavior. So this is why you don't realize when you give them too much overstimulation, and it can come in all kinds of forms. Like even a piece of paper can be overstimulating to somebody. A menu, you look at some menus, and I always like to use I go to the West Coast a lot, and so In-N-Out Burger has a simple menu. You look at it, doesn't overwhelm you, you feel comfortable, so you come back and they have a decent, hamburger. I'd probably get shot out there if you say it's a decent hamburger. They think it's the greatest hamburger in the world, but it's a hamburger. But they have a really simple menu. Everybody loves them, and they do have great service, and they keep it simple. And there's a reason that too much stimulation to the brain in the 2D world gets people to shut down, basically. So it's the ability to focus on the figure or the relevant stimuli, like the teacher's instructions against a background of competing stimuli, that like somebody tapping a pencil or the noise in the hallway. So can you focus on this? Like right now, you may be getting dinged by your phone and something else. Can you stay focused on this? This is the relevant. You wanted to watch this. We're going over this once. You want to watch it, finish the webinar. There's going to be competing noises and stimuli all around you. It's hard to compete against everything, but can you block all that out and finish this and learn something today? Hopefully you are learning something today. Here's a young man, Isaac, was in 3rd grade. I think this was he had a low Figureground, operating about 20%. His overall performance was about in the 30% range when he started. He had a low size too, but his reading ability was way above his grade level, but his spelling was way below, and his parents were very frustrated by how smart he was. But he had a low mental picture and a low Figureground, and then a low size and shape. We'll get into those in a minute. And cross pattern. He had a cross pattern issue too. So those things were holding him down, and he became a really good student. He was homeschooled because he could not fit in with traditional schooling, and was very frustrated. Was an angry young boy, actually. So Figureground, staying focused on a specific task amongst distractions, and then blocking out competing background environment. So sight, sound, and touch. So many ADHD symptoms relate more to Figureground than focusing issues. It's just hands down the biggest problem is they have can't fit the Figureground. They can't focus on the figure, block out the ground. If you watch your child, or have them look at a piece of paper and watch if they start pulling back, they're getting overloaded. That's all you got to realize. If they start pulling back, they're getting overloaded. And your job as a parent has to be to recognize that and realize they're getting overloaded, and you need to change somehow and regroup. It's almost like a resetting of the brain. They have to get comfortable again with whatever. Now, the the competing background could be, the marketing people at Walmart or Toys, I was going to say Toys R Us, but I don't think they're around anymore. It's Target or something like that. And they're bombarded with advertisements, and those things are going to work. The shiny truck or the toy or whatever, they want it. And so you gotta change the focus and change something, and you have to divert them to something else. And I know that's easier said than done, but the task is to keep them focused on something else and get them to realize what needs to take place. So directional discrimination. So the ability to distinguish directional orientation without relying on visual cues. So 2D world versus the 3D world. Once in school, your mind must differentiate between characters that look very similar, such as D's and V's, P's and Q's, in between words such as mom and wow. Those things are all, and and on and no. So there's all these little things you have to see and distinguish. So, and then on top of that, you have to follow instructions, or you have to give instructions in the right sequence. So between direction and tracking, if you can direct someone in the right area, give directions, and they can follow along with the tracking. But if they have low tracking and low direction, they can really have a problem. So that they just don't, their conversations aren't very good. They can't give instructions very well. They get frustrated. So, Madeline, I was gonna bring her in because she's one of these students that was really frustrated. She had a mental picture issue and a Figureground, but everything else was kind of just right there at average. So she was one of these students. She's operating about 43%, but she reads way above her grade level. She spells at her grade a little bit above her grade level, and she does math above her grade level. She had a little bit of an auditory discrimination. So she was a little behind in auditory discrimination, especially for how well her reading was. But she was kind of one of those kids that the teachers couldn't figure out why she wasn't performing at a higher level. And I can tell you it was mainly because of these two things. She wasn't performing at a higher level, but her direction, I was using her kind of as, she's like right at average in third grade. And she'll struggle probably in school most of her life, and if she wouldn't get this corrected. And these things are going to take a long time to develop, and all these are just going to come across as an average student. So letter or word reversal, problems identifying right, left, up, down. And then you can know right, left, up, and down, but you have problems with north, south, east, and west. So, there's people that don't like directions given to them by go north and then turn south to go east, and they just do not like that. So position in space, have you got to use that kind of this little story about it, is that have you ever been standing in line and the line doesn't move, or you see somebody standing like 10 feet from the next person, and or the order stand or something, they're like way away from it. It's all position in space. Same thing if they're letters on a piece of paper are all over the place. That's position in space. They don't understand spacing. Artists that can space things well, people look at a poster and they're all over the place. That's position in space. Their brain can't associate where does it go. So sometimes it's the 3D world versus the 2D world, and they both affect everything. Artists can take the 3D world and place it on a 2D canvas, and I'd say some people can take that canvas, that 2D world, and make it look exactly like the 3D world, which is definitely a gift. And so you're kind of knowing where your body is and surrounding things, and then also being able to take that, draw it, see a 3D image of it, understand if you're too close to somebody, too far away from them. Then are you reading social skills? Can you read the cues that people are giving you? Can you pick up on the sense that they like you, don't like you, or are you just kind of out of there? So kids that are kind of the absent-minded professor, or don't have can't make friends, they usually have a low position in space. They don't understand relationships. And so a lot of really bright, a lot of gifted kids that I've tested have usually have position in space. Normally that's their one weakness. They'll be like, I did a couple of sixth graders that I did evals for, and both of them were college level in sixth grade, and yet they were indifferent to their teacher, indifferent to their parents. They didn't have any friends, and so they couldn't really get along with very many people, and that was going to be a struggle for them. Their parents want to get that corrected. So being able to organize materials such as outlines, study guides can be difficult because you can't conceptually relate to things. All right. Same thing with coordinating your fingers and hands and arms and writing, fine motor skills, and then your body. You having a relationship to the physical world. They run into things, they knock into people. They can be an introvert or even an extrovert because they go either way. They're either really shy. A lot of people that have position in space are usually really shy. They call themselves introverted, because their brain just can't differential between things in relationship, good, bad, right, wrong, hard, soft. That's a difficult thing for them to see that big picture in the position in space. So here was a young boy, Thomas, had a really low position in space, operating about 20%. Really though, he's in 11th grade, college level stuff, advanced everything. His math was struggling mainly because of his shape. And these three things were holding kind of him back because he should have been in the honor roll. Eventually he became in the honor roll after he did the program. I have a post one on him. It's pretty interesting where he ended up going. I'll show that in in the next workshop. But kinesthetic learner, football player, smart kid, but man, his position in space, understanding, he didn't have a lot of friends, was so low, and it hurt him. He didn't understand to turn in his homework. He was turning in his homework. That's more size than anything, but low position in space, operating about 20%. So brought this whole thing down to he's barely making 50%, yet he was a really smart young man. So relationships, friends and family, understanding those relationships, understanding, and then your environment, you can get disoriented or unfamiliar settings, lost. Social skills, coordination, thinking that big picture stuff. And so size is your ability to determine importance and magnitude of things. That's really what it is. The brain's taking all this information in and determining what's important, what's not important. And so if you can't process this information, it's the inability to organize a task or in a timely manner, misjudging the time the task will take to do the assignment or task, thus running out of time or being chronically late for an engagement or deadline. So you do something and you misinterpret what's going on. And then a lot of times they'll overreact to something that's totally insignificant, that it's some trivial thing. And there's a lot of bosses like this. It's some trivial thing that sets them off. And they don't understand the importance and magnitude of every little thing. And they usually have a low size. Most leaders, everybody that I've ever tested that is a owner of a company, usually at a pretty decent size because they got to make decisions. So this helps when they have a really low size, it creates anxiety. Most kids that are on anxiety meds have a really low size, and they can't determine which is more important. They can't determine out of the 2 or 3 or 4 choices which is more important. You'll go into the same thing when you're eventually will make you an offer to do something, and you got to make a choice. I want to buy this or I don't want to buy this. Well, you may not understand the importance of why we want to sell this to you and what's important about it. You're into that same thing, and you're reliant on the relevant information and what was really made sense to you. And we're trying to make sure that your brain associates everything it can with this is important for you to do. And yet you may not pick that up. You just don't get how important it is to to know what these are, how to fix them. So that's the same thing. And so when you're trying to make two decisions, the road, you got two choices, and you got to pick which way you're going to go. A lot of people, that creates a lot of anxiety for people. And same thing with tests. They got to make choices on a test, and people are so worried about failure. Failure is just a learning experience to us. You got to embrace failure and realize it's just a learning experience. Austin was a young man that had a really low size, really holding him back, having a real time, again, tested his grade level and above. Everything was above his grade level. But he was, failing school and wouldn't forget to turn his homework. He'd do his homework and then forget to turn it in. And for 15-year-old boys, they're kind of tough to do any program with because a lot of hormones going on. But this is what I was saying pre and post eval. Here's his pre and this is his post eval. We brought everything up. Why did I jump sometime? And it brought all his abilities up, and performing really well. He learns now all three ways. So he can learn auditory, kinesthetic, and visual, where before he was never a visual learner. If you look at that, and if you find somebody that's not a visual learner, they don't really operate in the school system very well. If they have a 0 here, they do not operate in the school very well at all. That's what he was struggling with. He did not operate very well. He was a kinesthetic learner, but we did bring everything up so that he was able to learn all three ways. So size, they can physically assess a situation. So it's that fear and risk and reward. Can they assess that? A lot of people that are kind of the daredevil risk takers are going to have a low size because they just set everything else aside, and they don't, they're balls to the walls, and they're a risk taker, and they don't realize how dangerous some things are. And I laugh because I was one of these people that used to take an awful lot of risks that I don't know if I do it the same now at my age, but probably my wife would disagree and say I'm still a risk taker. So, and your child can mentally determine the relative importance when making a decision. Does your child have a poor sense of timing? Difficult with time components of like task management. Do they understand how long something's going to take? That if they're going to write a report, it's going to take them an hour when they think it's going to take them 5 minutes. And then do they misinterpret the importance of the situation? They underreact, overreact. And then, so size, time component, task management, interpretation, misinterpretation of importance of a situation, underreacting or overreacting. And so shape is the number 10. And so it's really all of them brought together, and because you're processing all this bits of information into a complete concept, such as like an activity like math or reading. So you gotta bring all these processes together in the shape and recognize the pattern. So it's pattern recognition. It's why math students usually have a pretty decent shape. Sometimes I've seen them have low shape, but still understood the concept. But it's really it's really understanding those patterns. So seeing the big picture, the cause and effect of things. That's why you need to be able to have all 10 of these processes operating so that you can see the cause and effect. So this was Bella, very sharp young lady. She had a really low shape, and math was just horrid for her. Even though she did decent with it, she could do it, but she couldn't. She later on was having a real struggle with understanding the concept of math. It just seemed like as she grew up, and we were still in touch with her, and this was done like 3 years ago. She's struggled in math, and we got her up, and we keep working on it, and her parents keep working on things, and it's been a process with her getting her shape up to kind of understand all the bigger picture things. So it's working better. It's way better than it was. It's just that it's one of those things that was one of our weakest things, and it just keeps getting better and better and better. And so comprehending a story, assembling concepts, conceptualizing ideas, pattern recognition, do they have difficulty understanding math concepts? So, comprehending that story is seeing that can be a combination of shape and mental picture. So those are the 10 processes parents should check. You should always know these things, and these are great to do it. I'll just tell you that a lot of programs will test their focus, their cross-pattern motor match, mental picture tracking, Figureground, and directional discrimination. They usually don't have position, space, size, and shape. They usually don't test these last three. So it's one of the things that our program is going to do, or what we'll talk about here in a little bit, is when we do an assessment, we check all these 10 and make sure where they are, what they're operating at. And so knowing your child's baseline, that's what I'm going to talk about next. And I really do appreciate you sticking around. I know if you're still here, you're really getting something out of this workshop, and I hope it's been worth the last hour. And I'll try to cover the rest of this stuff as quickly as I can to wrap up and get you to understand how you can, kind of pinpoint their frustrations. And so, I've done just hundreds and hundreds of children and adults, assessments over the last 5 years in our office in Overland Park. And what it's really been getting down to is these neuron connections. You have this neural network, the synaptic network, and you have these bundles of neurons that create thought, and that's what everything happens with. And it's really trying to gauge that subconscious mind or unconscious mind. And so neural connections, we grow them and we lose them every day. There's just millions of them being formed, and some of them the right way and some of them are not building the right network. And so we've got to build the right network for learning. This is similar to if a person had a stroke and you wanted to rewire their brain. So you kind of know, because they had a stroke and they could talk before and they can't talk now, that they do physical activities and they get them to talk again, right? And the same thing with walking. They get them up, they get them walking again, they teach them their muscles to walk again. But it really starts with the connection in the brain. The brain has to connect something for the muscles to actually activate, and you send a signal down there to say, move your legs, do all that. And even when you lose your limbs, not all the time, but even when the stroke happens, the brain can rewire itself if you do the right things. And so same thing happens with learning. If that wasn't developed, you can rewire the brain to learn correctly. So that foundational learning, that's what we're all about. And so for many years, medical researchers have observed how physical coordination problems interfere with learning processes and how physical skills are integrated with motor skills. And so mental skills, excuse me. And so, it's what happens if your child's brain didn't create the synaptic bundle to respond to the inputted information. So what happens if something didn't create that synaptic network to learn a certain way, like your mental picture, let's say you didn't develop your mental picture, and so you're a poor speller. Well, you've got to find out where they're at. You got to measure where they're at, and no different than we measure our child academically all the time, what their grade is, all that kind of stuff. We don't measure their automatic responses. And so to do this, and some of this is we've got to measure that unconscious brain, their subconscious, their unconscious brain, and what's going on happening automatically, what are automatic responses. And so we've got a baseline assessment, evaluation, test, whatever you want to call it, that starts with understanding it. And it's very simple to do. I performed a lot of them. Probably the hardest thing is trying to be impartial, but it's simple. And so we've had so many parents over the years ask us to be able to do this from afar. And so we're developing that. We have developed it. And I brought this up because one of my favorite books is a book called Deep Survival, and it's who lives, who dies, and why. And it's the why that gets me with everything. Everybody wants to know the why. Who survived? Why did they survive? I want to learn why they survived, why these other people died. And he came up with like these top 12 things that you have to do, and they're all really good. And the one that stands out to me is the mental map. And I have said that for years, that you have to be able to change your mental map. And if you can't, like, if your mental map right now is that your child's limited by them being labeled ADHD, then you're pigeonholing them into some limitations, where you should be thinking that my child's got a gift of ADHD, and we've got to find a way to them to express whatever it is. There's a lot of talented people out there that have become famous because of the way their brains are wired, but it took a hell of a support system for them to do it. If you really look at it, I think the study needs to be in the support system, and you have to have people that'll help you and do all these other things, but somebody has to change their mental map, and it usually gets down to like a mother or a father that support them. You look at all the Olympic athletes, all the athletes, they usually have parents that supported them, or somebody along the way supported them. And when you're in the survival situation, most of the time you're on your own. But if you're with somebody else, same kind of deal. If somebody doesn't believe and other people believe, and they survive because they changed their mental map, and they knew what they were at. Like, they knew in this book, and I want to give it completely away because I would tell you to go read this book, but it's in the nature section. It's probably one of the best management books out there, but it really gets down to is you got to assess where you're at. You got to know, here's where I'm at, and here's where I want to go. I want to survive and live, and I got to get off the island, or I've got to do this, or I got to do that. And so it's really about, as a moment to moment, assessing your situation and changing your mental map to do that. And so it's, I know it's a kind of a lead in, but I wanted to emphasize that because it's really fascinating to me. It's that why. And you want to know why, because like this, Aristotle wrote, anyone can become angry. That is easy, but to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that's not easy. So he's right. That is not easy. Everybody can be. So you have money and time, and we've got these assessments, and I just give you a range that, you're not going to be paying $250 or $2,000. And that's what I know in our area, in the Kansas City area, that's what, our normal charge is $257 for us to do an assessment here in our office. And we've got, and I'd say the average for most school systems of the private schools around here, the assessments start at $650 and probably are $900, and then they do multiple assessments on a child, and it's usually a few weeks to 2 or 3 months before you can get into them. And a lot of times the schools won't pay for them. Sometimes your insurance will pay for them, but a lot of times it ends up being the parent's responsibility. So I know that you don't want me to tell you that you're going to have to spend a bunch of money to do something, and you won't, but you do want to have some type of an assessment on your child. Now, if all you want to do is get your child put on medication, go see your doctor. I mean, go see your medical doctor. That's the quickest and easiest way to do that. But again, look at the cost of medication the rest of their life, and the odds are I'm staying on it more than 3 or 4 years. It's some people are on it the rest of their life. A lot of people, the statistics is they're off in 2 to 3 years because a lot of times they can't afford it. But other times they don't like it because they think you can outgrow it, but it's very difficult to just outgrow some of these symptoms without changing actual structure in the brain. So to do things right all the time, whether the skill is reading, emotional control, athletic skills, controlling behavior must be part of our automatic response system. We must assess that person's automatic response system, just like scholastic skills, to find the true weaknesses. So that's, we do that all the time. And I know it can be frustrating for your child, and this gives them answers. And of course, one of the things that's going on right now is you're trying to coach them, right? You're trying to be the coach, you're trying to be the mentor, you're trying to be the parent, you're trying to guide them through. And that's what you need to do. That's your job, is to be the guide, to be that parent, to be their hero, to be that person that's going to teach them things. But it's like if you're the coach and you want to coach somebody, Wooden's always said a coach is someone who can give you correction without causing resentment. Chances are you're giving correction right now and their child's taking it as resentment. And once they resent something, that's a whole nother topic of workshop that we can work on. But it resentment creates, revenge and it's resistance and revenge. So one of my other nice sayings is that between what I think I want to say, what I believe I'm saying, what I say, what you want to hear, what you believe you understood, and what you understood, there are at least 9 possibilities for misunderstanding. Now, I think this is exponentially more when you're dealing with somebody with ADHD. So I always laugh because I go 9. What do you mean 900 or 9,000 different ways of possibilities of misunderstanding? So anyway, so parents, I want to help you answer your child's question on why they face so many struggles and frustrations throughout their day. So I hope you're still interested in this, and I hope you can see the benefit of it, because I've been planning this for over a year now, and a cutting edge opportunity to work with caring parents. Been working with people, we've been beta testing it over and over again. We think we have all the kinks out of it, and it's fairly smooth, and it's going to be convenient, inexpensive. It's going to be at your house, and we'll be working together. So I'm going to help you uncover a bunch of the things we just talked about, and so we can get a roadmap for success for your child and give them the answers, the simple answers that make more sense than some complex analysis or some label that just says you're ADHD. What does that mean? When somebody says you're ADHD, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't, oh, I'm hyper, or I don't focus well. I mean, that's really what we want to know, is we want to get down to the root causes of it, and not some, vague term. And so one of the things I wanted to point out is that when we deal with things, the Johari window is something that was developed in the 60s by a couple of guys in the United States. Doesn't sound like it, but and it's used in all leadership training at high levels. But you have this known to others and known to self. That's public, that's open, that's what everybody knows about yourself. And then you've got your blind spot, not known to self, so you don't know it. And then unknown to others, stuff you hide from everybody, right? And you have these arrows going down in here. So I hide things from my parents, parents hide things from other people. You got your blind spots, things about your kids that your kids don't know about themselves. Excuse me, again, jumping. I don't know why it's doing it. And then where we live, kind of a lot of times is to get them to understand their blind spots, and then also to have this self-discovery of that untapped potential, because you don't know what your potential is, and that's really what you're trying to explore too, is to research this. And to me, this whole area is kind of the unconscious brain, that subconscious, unorganized brain. And what we're going to do is do an assessment on this area to find out and give them real answers and feedback so that they can improve, so they know where point A is. Right now, they really don't. If you ask me, they probably don't know where point A is. They just know that they've got a label, and then there's no corrective action. And we don't do an assessment without any corrective action. We'll have a plan for you with corrective action, and that's going to be the big difference between us and probably 99% of everybody else that's out there, is that they're not going to have any type of corrective action other than, work harder, do this, take medication. And again, if you're looking